But once you have that innovation, and I call it a winning innovation. Once we have that innovation that transforms the way that things are being done in the company, if you can find a technology that will further make that innovation perform more efficiently, faster, better, then that becomes your technological advantage, and that gives you your competitive advantage. So that's how I view the implementation of the paradigm. It's not about this technology, bringing technology and hope that it gives us the competitive advantage. You have to figure out where the technology can help you, and more often than not, it comes from an innovation, something that they figured out how to do better, not necessarily with technology yet, okay? But when they now apply technology to this innovation, then that becomes a very powerful thing for the company, and it becomes their advantage.
Welcome and good day. Today we have a special treat for you. It's season 12 of Leader's Edge, episode 7. And we have Boogie Boydon with us. He is the creator of the Davidic paradigm, a paradigm that was originally designed for technology, but today you'll find out that it can go far beyond that. We have equip, enable, and empower. But before that, I'll invite Boogie to introduce himself.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for that introduction. Yes, I am the author of the growth paradigm, and it's a digital transformation framework, but it does not focus mostly on the technology. And in fact, what I do is I try to focus more on the people side, and that's why our episode today is about equipping, enabling, and empowering people in an organization.
You know, when it comes to equipping and enabling and empowering, these are actually words that I've heard for a long, long time. Okay, maybe let's start with that. How is it a little different today than from when I started first hearing these words? I think in the early 2000s, when I started running, especially empowering. But let's take the words one by one. What does equip mean, and maybe how has it become more significant today than it was previously?
Okay, I'm using those three words in the context of the digital transformation framework that I created, which is the Vedic growth paradigm. Because when I created it, my main motivation was to look at what is really ailing the digital transformation journey of a lot of organizations, and that is the people factor. Okay? I've been in IT for more than 35 years, and I've seen how technology has improved a lot. And in fact, it's even accelerating now. And we see that on the technology side, technology has been, well, developed so much, right? Okay. From the early days when were having the difficulty harnessing the power of technology, we've had a lot of failed projects at the time. This was late 80s, early 90s. Okay. Uh, but I've seen how those things improve. But when I talk to a lot of companies, a lot of business owners, I realized that the problem still is on the user side. In the rate of acceptance and adoption has always been the problem, and it's still the problem. And so when I created this framework of mine, I focused on solving that problem. And there were three things that I found out. No? One is that it's a case of technology overwhelm, where technology was being introduced too much too soon, and people had this resistance to that sudden change, to that introduction of the technology. The other is inclusivity. People were feeling that they were being left out, okay? That they were not being considered, and that their own personal journey, side by side with the digital transformation journey of the organization, is not being considered. Okay? So, and the third one is that this all of these things contribute to a lack of clarity in the direction of where the digital transformation should go. So what I did was I figured out figured out how to find out what is the main pain points of an organization through a diagnostics program. And it's coming from the people themselves. And it's a cross section of the organization, not just from the top management, but all the way to the rank and file. And from this, what I focus on is figure out specific areas where can create more impact to the organization. And one of those things is this. Okay. Sometimes people think of technology as the great savior of their company, and they invest in these big applications and systems. When all the while, the problem is really, well, there's this just one employee in one department out there sitting in his cubicle or in his table, and he's not really that productive because he is not equipped, okay, with the right tools. And that's where the equipped part comes in. We try to figure and this is one specific example. Okay. A company bought an enterprise software, but they were not extracting the right value from the software, from the system, because reports were still delayed. And when we traced it, we realized that it was because some of the data was coming from a department, and there was this employee who was using Excel, but he was not equipped to use Excel for its full power. He was using maybe 2%, 3% of the power of Excel, right? And so my simple recommendation was, let's upskill that employee. Let's equip him with, learning, understanding. Well, hey, Excel has more power than what you're doing now, and he became more productive. And yes, the reports came in on time.
Excellent. That's a very good example with Excel. And sometimes when you do implement new technology, we assume that certain people or everybody has a certain level of maybe skill set with a given, even Microsoft, when they introduced 365, okay, they did put a lot of effort. I know companies that put a lot of effort into upskilling the people to use 365. But at the same time, I also know companies that didn't do it well. Okay, so they're also a little lost, and
Yeah.
that's a common thing that actually happens. Uh, Now, when it comes to equipping, because this is what I've found out with, especially with enterprise things, and I'm more from the operation side. So
Okay.
when we started doing things like our performance appraisals online, we lost the actual conversation we used to have because
Okay.
now we could just do it online. Okay, so we just fill it out. Hey, send it over. Yay, we did our coaching, and it was very, very quick. Yes, it made things more convenient for us, but at the same time, we lost that essential conversation that was supposed to happen, but now it's just happening online. Okay, like I'll send you, hi, hey Boogie, here's your rating. Tell me what you think, and then you just type something, and that was it. Oh, I completed my evaluation, and so that was lost. And in that case, how does your model does it account for that also?
Well, I'm not too sure how it would account for that particular example that you're saying, but one of the things that we're recommending is that uh, the technology should be used in such a way that it still promotes the basic three C's, okay, which is communication, cooperation, and collaboration. Okay, so
Mm,
and how do you do that? Of course, in a face-to-face setting, maybe it's a lot more, it's a lot easier to do. But as you said, when we went online, some of those things were lost, and that's what we're trying to bring back. Okay, and there are tools. There are also tools, and it also depends on how the leadership also would would position the technology to be able to achieve the same quality of communication that was before.
right.
But I agree with you. Some things were lost, yes, when we transitioned to online. But I think people are learning also to cope with it, and we're adjusting. We're continuously adjusting.
Okay. Especially when it comes to the leadership of an organization, and I'm sure you've seen this. Many times they just throw money at the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, look, we need to fix this. Boogie's got a solution here. Boogie, here's your money, and they just disappear.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. In some organizations, that's usually the case, right?
Right.
But I think more and more or businesses are waking up to the fact that a lot of this approach does not work anymore. For example, there's a client that I have, and she for the longest year she was wondering why. In fact, she said, "Why are they saying that I'm low in innovation? I've introduced a lot of these things already, okay, and I realized that it's because there was somewhat disconnect between the things that were being introduced and the way that the people appreciated and related to the technology. So I guess it's also being corrected somehow, that
Okay.
attitude that you're saying.
Now,
Yeah.
would you consider that part of equipping, or is that part of enabling, empowering, part of the three topics we're discussing?
Well, equipping is basically just giving them the tools. But to equip them does not necessarily mean that it will create some progress, right? Okay.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, I give you the tool, but finding or moving to the next part, which is making sure that the employee uses the tool that you equipped him with, that's where the enabling portion comes. So which means that you need to do training, you need to do monitoring, you need to do coaching, okay? So that you make sure that the employee not just, gets the tool and then just lets it uh sit there, right? Okay.
Mhm.
So the enabling part is making sure that what you equip the employee with is being used properly and it's being appreciated. Another example, uh, there's this technology company and they created a they're in the insurance field. Okay? Their clients are insurance companies and they created this very good, very sophisticated enterprise system to help the insurance companies, especially in the customer acquisition part. Okay. But no matter how many of the people in the company were saying, "Oh, you have a very good system," when they check down the road, what was the rate of adoption? I said, they realized that the agents were not using it, so they were not properly enabled. So that's where the enabling actually comes in.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's stay with the insurance example you have. If I were to introduce a new system, of course, you equip them, you give them the necessary skills to use the system. Then enabling, other than, how would you say, assuring that they will use the system. Okay. You also want to ensure that they get the benefits from it. Am I
Yeah.
understand that correctly?
Yes. Yes. Well, not only just get the benefits from it, but that they become comfortable with using it so that they voluntarily accept and adopt it as part of their regular working tools. Okay. So, because sometimes even if you equip them and you say, okay, here's the tool, they might not rise to that certain level of being comfortable that makes them really productive with the tool. Okay, so you need to make sure that they reach that level of comfort and that they adjust to it and it becomes something that they not just like but really love. I love this tool. I love this technology.
Okay, so typically in the experiences that you've had, especially when you look at organizations, so far we've spoken about equip and enable. Between these two, which one do you think is usually missed most by organizations?
I think it's the enabling part because as you've said, the normal thinking is, hey, I gave you the tool, so it's up to you to figure it out, study it, and find out how it could help you.
Right, right.
I already gave it to you. Would I still be tasked to making sure that you use it? Sometimes the thinking is like that. Okay, so I
Right.
guess that's so the enabling part is the no. But once
Is
you get over that, well, anyway, I want preempt your your next question.
oh no, I'm sure you know what it is, which will be the next one, which is empower. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so far in our little journey, we've gone through equipping, enabling, and now we're at empowering. How does that connect to the other two?
Okay. My vision for digital transformation is this. Uh, well, just to give a brief background, when I introduce the Vedic growth paradigm to a company, I tell them first, okay, there are six growth areas that you can look into. It's governance, processes, resources, innovation, technology, and culture. And so we do a diagnostics and we figure out, okay, what are the areas that they need to work on, what are the growth opportunities. But I always emphasize that among the six, the culture is the one that's most important for me. For me, that's my in the way that I develop the very growth part. Because I'm telling them if we are not able to create a culture of growth in your organization or a growth mindset from among your employees, then any gains that we get from the first five will be difficult to sustain. Okay. So parallel to implementing the framework to the organization, I also introduce interventions where we work on the culture part. Now, why am I saying this, and what does it have to do with empowering? My view of digital transformation, the essence of digital transformation, is really making sure that your employees are become productive. It's harnessing the power of technology so that they become productive. But the essence of having a growth mindset is really also introducing to them and making them fully understand what the vision of the company is and getting their buy-in so that every day when they come to work, they know what they're coming to work for, right? And they're excited, they're empowered to do things because every time they're thinking, how will this contribute to the vision that we're trying to achieve? Okay. Now, related to that, I think the problem is that most companies are not well. The of course it's usually led by a visionary, right? Most companies have started because of the vision of an owner or a founder or somebody. But communicating that vision to the rest of the organization, especially when the organization becomes big, I think that's where the problem lies. Now, at some point, okay, the people don't even understand what it is that they're doing or why they are doing what they're doing, and then somehow the vision is lost. So I think that's also an important factor in empowering. It's about getting your people to buy into the vision of the company so that every day when they wake up, when they come to work, they they know that they're empowered, no, that and when they make a decision, they're empowered to do things because their main motivation is, will this contribute to the vision, to the attainment of the vision of our company? I think that's the empowerment part that I'm talking about.
Actually, what you're saying, I would say strikes a chord with many people, and especially the cultural part.
Yeah.
Recently, I don't know when this happened, maybe about a year ago, a large bank in the US, they had found out that their sales group was padding the numbers intentionally, okay,
Yeah.
because they had to reach a target. Now, when they studied it backwards, they said that the bank wanted to do something innovative and they wanted to grow their business organically within the client. So it's short, get more business from their existing clients. And when I looked at it, I said maybe they didn't take into consideration that internally their culture was so driven by hitting a number that they forgot
Mm.
what they were doing. They just have to hit the number. Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so in that case, it's the culture in that case is very I would say it's more of a block. a
Yeah.
barrier more
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
anything else, or it could be simply that the organization doesn't understand its culture well enough. Okay.
Yeah. And
And go
yeah,
ahead.
so go ahead.
No, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying here is that there's there's really no vision at all in that case because they're driven by numbers. They're driven by money, by the revenue that they're
Right,
going to bring. It doesn't have to be that way, right?
right,
Uh, but I guess the problem also is that sometimes most companies have this vision that when you ask an ordinary employee, what's the vision of your company? I doubt if somebody would be able to recite that, right? Okay.
of course.
But I read this book by Salim Ismail. It's called Exponential Organization. And he was saying that, and he studied companies that grew 10 times faster than their competitors. Okay. There are companies like Google, Uber, Spotify. And what he was saying that all of these companies had something in common. And what is that? That their vision was expressed in terms of a massive transformative purpose. Okay. Something that was simple, something but that was easy to remember. And everyone, for example, Google. Google is how old? 25 years. 25 years. Okay? But it grew to be I forgot the numbers anymore. I think it's there in the $400 billion something already. Uh, but they grew from being a small company to this huge uh, com- enterprise that they are now. But they had a very simple vision, right? But it was expressed in as a massive transformative purpose. And what is that? Organize the world's information. Very simple, right? And everyone can remember that, right? If you ask an
Right.
employee of Google, what's your company's vision? Well, it's organized to organize the world's information. Okay. But ask any other company, what's your company's vision? I doubt if you're an ordinary employee will be able to recite
Well,
their company's vision.
why I'm laughing is unfortunately one of the characteristics we Pinoys have is we like to say things in so many words, which can be said in 2 or 3 words.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
I get a
agree.
little lost with it, you know. I mean, come on, there's some very, very, how do you say, common visions that everybody knows. You know, for example, you have just do it, you have think different. These are very easy to understand and get, and I know it works. And maybe just an idiosyncrasy of us Pinoys. Now we like to write so many words with such a simple thought. But the tricky part for me with culture is, you know, and this comes from my when we do strategic planning. Usually, the biggest threats are internal, not external.
Yeah.
Okay, when something happens externally, the company will do something. Period. Okay, so it's usually the internal part, and very few organizations grasp that. And mostly it hinges around the culture more than anything else. Uh, it's not, for example, in the case I was talking about earlier, it's not that the culture was wrong. Their culture is let's make money. That's their
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but they didn't understand it. Okay, so
Yeah.
uh,
That's correct.
and you know that's why when it comes to empowering, if you when you look at it say, my goodness, their culture needs some adjustment, or maybe we can adjust what I'm introducing to fit the culture that they have, regardless of what's pasted on the wall. You know, mission, vision, values. Okay. Which one do you usually do? Did you work on changing the culture, or do you adjust what you're offering to the culture?
Okay. Well, I focused on I actually focus on one because the Davidic growth paradigm is partially also inspired by this book by Dr. Carol Dweck. It's called Mindset. Okay. And in that book, Dr. Carol Dweck said that, some people have a fixed mindset. Like when you ask them to, when you challenge them in something, they will say, oh, I cannot do that because that's, uh, my abilities are only up to this. This is what I know. Okay. But the person with a growth mindset will say, oh, yes, let me look into that. Let me study that and see what can be done. Okay. So, but what caught my attention in that book is that Dr. Carol Dweck was saying that a growth mindset can be learned. It can be taught. It can be developed because it's not something that's clear cut. Like a person is either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. No, it's not that. In fact, what you said was that for most of us, we're continuously vacillating between the two. There are times when we have a fixed mindset, uh, and there are times when we have a growth mindset. Okay, it depends on the situation. But what I learned from the book is that there can be interventions that can be done so that culture, a growth mindset can be developed in the company, in the minds of the people. So in terms of addressing the culture aspect, that's where I focus on how to build a growth mindset within the organization.
Now this is definitely. Let's just ask your opinion on this because I'm from a facilitating training background, and many of our courses always start with mindset. Now, typically, if you're a facilitator, you usually give them maybe 2 or 3 days with the group to get something done. And in those 2 or 3 days, what I realized was that, if I threw the mindset out the window, okay, and just taught them to repeat certain actions, the mindset would come, but they have to repeat the action. Then the mindset comes along. Okay, maybe
Okay.
another way to put it is I think Sir Francis Bacon, he has a beautiful quote that goes, if you start with certainty, you'll end with doubt. But if you
Mhm.
start with doubt, you'll end with certainty. Okay, so I said, yes, I know mindset's important. Yes, you want both. But between the two, for me, get the action going.
Mhm.
So just get them to repeat it. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's also what is behind some of the things that we do in terms of introducing growth. It's based on exercises. It's based on exercises. It's really making them realize that when when they started and they were thinking that, oh, I don't think I can do it, but we do the exercises, and then eventually they become excited because, oh, uh it's something that I can do. It's something that I can learn. Okay. For example, there's this thing that I sometimes do with uh the participants in my workshop. I saw this video on YouTube, and there was this guy who was saying that, most people would think that they cannot draw, but he went on to, to show simple techniques of where to start, what to do, and eventually you can actually produce different types of characters from the drawing.
Right,
And I lead the people into doing that. And after all of them were laughing, and they're showing their pictures around, and they say, "Oh, I can draw, I can draw." So, and that I think starts uh, generating in their minds that thinking that, yes, a growth mindset feels good. Okay, that's one. And then a growth mindset is something that maybe I can do. So I
right,
think that's how. And
right.
yeah, I agree with what you said earlier.
For me, another great example is like when you go to the gym. Okay, see these people show up on day one. Wow, they're complete, matching brands. They have the thing. They're complete, but then they're gone in 2 months. And
Yeah,
you see the hesitant guys who come in, looking a little shy. And after 3 months, they're still there, but they're actually continuing.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
they just got going. Yeah, this is that's very interesting. And more importantly, with the events of today, with we're coming out of the pandemic and all, and no matter what you say, the world has changed. Period.
Oh yes.
Uh, and uh, and there's also the speed that we have to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think this is let's just take a look at supply chain, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there was a very reliable system that practically broke overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Now it doesn't work, so of course everybody was lost. Okay, you know, and it's not only for supply chain. That's a lot of other things. Okay, even in the U.S., democracy was challenged.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, practically overnight, something that we all grew up with, poof, it suddenly just disappeared. So that does put us in a position where maybe the growth mindset isn't an option. Okay,
Hmm.
we have to we have to push ourselves outwards into it. Now, the other thing that I've also noticed, especially when I work with organizations, when you look at the three, are these things that equip, enable, and empower. Let's say you were to score them. Okay, uh, do you have to be 100% in all of them, or can you do maybe to a certain level that they're there? Or what's your take on that?
Okay. Well, it's not really more of measuring
Mhm.
whether it's happening. It's just assuring that they progress in moving from, as I've said, no, they can't stop at just being equipped, right? Okay, at some point you have to see and show and prove that you have enabled the employee. Okay, but the enabling part would have to be somehow measured in terms of the growth, the overall growth. Okay. Uh, one of one of the things that I use for measuring it's not individual, but it's based on the overall progress of the company. Because in my diagnostics, I use a digital maturity assessment, and based on their answers, we come up with a score, and we would say, okay, you're in between sporadic initiatives and intermittent success. Okay. And so your score says that you're there, let's say a 2.4 or something. So it's between 2 and 3. But what I recommend is that yearly we do the assessment again so that we would know whether we've moved. Because my goal is really just to move them from wherever they are just to the next step. Okay, we're not thinking of moving them 2 steps in a year or so. It's just, on the first year we work ourselves from being a 2 to a 3, and then on the next year we work ourselves from being a 3 to a 4. Eventually they will get to a 6, right? Okay, so but that's the idea, and I think that's where we can see whether the efforts are producing results, whether the whole enterprise, the whole company is moving in their digital maturity.
The I like what you're saying, and I could definitely relate to it. And I think one of the challenges some organizations face is when you look at the three of them, sometimes they look at it as single items that are not supposed to be running together. Okay, there might be a sequence. Okay, it might enable, empower. I'm sorry, equip, enable, and empower. But ultimately, it's empowerment you want.
Yes.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
and sometimes organizations break it down into like individual rather than looking at it as a whole issue or something that has to be achieved and it's not entirely in terms of getting a perfect score, but like what you pointed out, progress through the levels and make sure that there's some kind of progress towards empowerment.
Yeah.
Okay, typically, and again, in your experience, when you talk about measuring this, because sometimes you're given a timetable. Okay, hey, I need this done in whatever years they say or months, whatever they give you. And usually, if it's the higher up boss, he'll probably give you an unrealistic target in the first place. Okay, you look at it, what's this? Okay, all right. And how do you account for that when you're talking to your clients? It says, "Hey, Boogie, okay, I'll go with this, but I need this in 2 years." Then when you do diagnostics, this looks more like a more
Yeah.
like a
Well,
4 year, 6 year effort.
yeah. Well, I make sure that the one who's going to champion it, because I need to find a champion also within the organization
Mhm.
first. And that's because if there's no one who is going to champion the paradigm, then we will have difficulty. So I need to find someone within the organization who will champion the entire thing. And and I need to get the buy-in, so that uh it's clear to them what I'm trying to propose. It's clear to them what we're trying to achieve, and it's clear to them that this would be the timeline, okay, and that they cannot expect something, overnight, or something just like magic that will appear just like that, okay. But I make sure that they fully understand that it's a process, it's a journey, and that they would need to uh, but that because of the monitoring process, we will see whether we are moving in the journey, and that's what's important. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
By the way, going back to what you were saying, the equip, enable, and empower. In fact, I would even want to think of it as a cycle, right? Okay. It's not that you start with equip and then you enable and then eventually when it's empower and that's it. Okay. At some point, people will maybe have to go back to because they move to a next level of responsibility to because they're now already they're enabled and they're already good at doing some part of the work that they were doing before. Okay. And they could be given, maybe new responsibilities or new things to oversee or whatever. And then they would have to go back to the equip part again and move again. So I think it becomes a cycle.
Actually, there's a model that's used, especially in the leadership framework, if you want
Mm,
to say, that pretty much follows that. Okay, because typically, if I get promoted, and this just doesn't happen like, let's say, your first time being a leader of people. This even happens at the higher levels. They will equip you. Okay, and they'll tell you, okay, here are the things, here are the reports you have to do. I'll put you through a coaching program so you can know how to coach your people, so forth and so on. They'll enable them. They give you a new title, and they say, okay, Paul, you're in charge of Boogie. But when it comes to empowering, what they forget a lot of is that now Boogie's playing a different role.
mhm,
He's not he's not the front line anymore. Now he's my leader. And they just leave it at that. Okay.
mhm,
And admittedly, that's where most of my bread and butter comes from. Okay, because I have to teach them their new roles because they just forget it. They
Yeah,
just forget
okay,
about it
okay, yeah, yeah,
completely.
yeah.
And this isn't just like, let's say, going into the supervisory. Sometimes if I'm moving up to a higher managerial position, let's say I'm going up to director level or something,
Mhm.
they also forget that the director's role is very different from that of a manager.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, and they just, okay, you're now the director. So typically, I see that happening also, especially in the progress of leaders in an organization, and I have to help them understand that. Okay, and so as you mentioned early in the beginning, this isn't just for technology. Okay, this is a paradigm that can be used, generally speaking, for organizations, especially when it comes to things like innovation, which we have to do, especially today. And for me, it's still that growth mindset that sometimes is a big stumbling block or a big barrier for many people. They might be able to teach it, but when it's them, they get stuck. Okay.
Yeah.
I think you've seen this because recently I was in another event and it was people like me. And they said, you must have the growth mindset to look at this. But right now, I mean, people like me, trainers, facilitators, they have to have a growth mindset themselves. That
Yeah,
now you have
yeah.
to go beyond just training and facilitating in order to exist. Otherwise,
Yeah, yeah.
and they couldn't see it themselves, and I was a little surprised. Okay,
Mhm.
uh, but I think that your model is excellent. I did review it the first time around. I asked you a couple questions, okay, which you
Okay.
addressed very well. But for me, the biggest challenge is still the culture.
Yeah, that's true,
Okay.
that's true.
An organization will have a culture no matter what, but how aware are they of the culture that they
Mhm.
have? Many of them actually don't quite grasp it. Okay, at least that's in my experience. There's some organizations that do get it right. They do their best to match what's on the wall or on the
Mhm.
ID or on all the posters. Some people don't even have anything like that because they don't think it's useful.
Mhm.
Okay. And most companies, you'll learn more of the unwritten rules working in the company.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, and that's the culture. That's what I like to say. But how about you? I notice you're also nodding your head in culture. Other than culture, what are the other of the three, maybe, or in your Davidic paradigm, your growth model? Which ones there are the most difficult to work with?
Uh, I guess it's the innovation part. Because well, but it also has something to do with culture. Like, if the culture is one where it's a little bit restrictive, okay, then even if people have ideas, they do not feel free to voice their ideas out.
Right.
Uh, but we've seen it a lot in other organizations that sometimes the innovation can come from ordinary employees, right? A bright idea coming from the floor, or a bright idea coming from someone who's on the ground, so to speak, who has a good grasp of what the problem really is. Sometimes the better ideas are coming from these people. But if the culture is one where, they're not, they don't, they don't feel empowered to speak out their minds, then I think it would be difficult to achieve any level of innovation. And so that's another thing that I'm trying to address when I introduce the reading blocks paradigm. Because I tell them that, in the digital transformation, technology actually comes last, because there are already a lot of technologies out there that can help you. But the key is finding out exactly where we need to intervene, where that technology can really be used that will give you the most impact. Okay. But one of the best ways to be able to use technology is first look at what is happening in the organization, figure out where the problem is, and then create an innovation. Okay, find a new way of doing it so that you are now doing it better than before. Okay, but once you have that innovation, okay, and I call it a winning innovation. Once we have that innovation that transforms the way that things are being done in the company, if you can find a technology that will further make that innovation perform more efficiently, faster, better, then that becomes your technological advantage, and that gives you your competitive advantage. So that's how I view the implementation of the paradigm. It's not about just technology, bringing technology and hope that it gives us the competitive advantage. You have to figure out where the technology can help you, and more often than not, it comes from an innovation, something that they figured out how to do better, not necessarily with technology yet, okay? But when they now apply technology to this innovation, then that becomes a very powerful thing for the company, and it becomes their advantage.
And that was when you said, just don't bring in technology. Some companies unfortunately feel like, what is it? FOMO, fear of
FOMO,
missing out.
yeah,
Oh, let's
yeah,
just get the technology because it's the
yeah,
in thing. Okay, so they
yeah,
just grab
yeah.
it and then throw
That's true.
money at it, and then
Yes,
okay, all right.
yeah, yeah. In fact, I have an article in on LinkedIn in my
Yes,
newsletter, which talks exactly about that. I think the title is even companies experience FOMO too, something like that. So, because
yeah,
that's true. That's true. As you pointed out, that's what's happening. You know? Money,
yeah.
it comes from the top, right? And people will be saying, "Oh, in our industry, this everyone is into enterprise application. Everyone is into, well,
Let's do
forgive me for
this.
saying this, ERP."
And this one even came from when I was, because I also facilitate project management courses, and I say, look, the first thing you have to get right is the purpose has to be understood the same way by everybody.
Yes.
Okay. And when I ask them that, they all look, oh, no wonder. Because they all have different ideas of what the purpose is. I said, oh, excellent. Okay. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so
And that
pretty
I
much, yes.
Yeah, and that I think is aligned to the what I mentioned earlier, that inclusivity portion, right? Okay. Um, and in fact, this comes out during when the scores come out. Some of the management will say, why is it that some of the respondents, of course, I hide the identities of
The
the
name.
respondents, but when they look at the numbers, they say, oh, is it that some of the respondents rated this thing high, and then some were like pretty low. And I said, especially in a big organization like you, this normally happens because it's a problem of communication. Okay, why? Because there are some areas in your organization where people have this initiative and it's not even communicated properly across the entire organization. So because they know what is being done, then they would rate that particular issue high. But those who are looking at it from another perspective and say, I don't think anything is being done in this area, rate it low. And that is what happens, right? So,
It's
yeah,
like when I'm in a class and ask, how many of you know your mission, vision, and purpose? And only the HR people answer.
yeah,
It's the same. It's the same thing. Maybe just put it a little differently.
yeah, that's
Uh,
true. That's true.
but you know one thing, and this I learned from a friend of mine, and believe it or not, he was actually the race director of Ferrari in
Uh-huh.
the years
Okay.
of Alan Prost.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he said, as a leader, your job is to decide. The ideas come from your staff.
Yeah, yeah, huh? Yeah,
Okay. You don't have to have all the ideas. In fact, that's wrong thinking. They have better ideas than you. He goes,
yeah,
but you
yeah,
have to
that's true.
decide. But you have
Yeah,
to decide.
yeah,
But I think you also know that some of our leaders think that they have to has to come from them. I mean, and they'll
yeah,
insist.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
But yes,
that
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, that brings something to mind. In one of the sessions I've had, okay, one of the issues that came out was about micromanagement. Okay,
Hmm,
and they were saying, uh, we have leaders in the organization who are micromanagers. They always they're breathing down our necks and I said, sometimes it's basically a case where it's because they lack the information. Okay. And in fact, we've already done that also with another client. The way we solved that was through management dashboards. This is in the
hmm,
context of technology, of course,
yes.
in digital transformation.
Right.
And it came in the form of management dashboards. Okay. It's about extracting data from everywhere, putting them together and giving the manager a particular view that he needs. And so
Right.
once he sees that, then he doesn't have to, be breathing down the necks of everybody.
Right, right.
Yeah.
When it comes to micromanagement, because I know there's a bad micromanagement, but sometimes micromanagement is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sometimes just necessary. Like there's that ever famous question: would you board an airplane who you know that the staff were not micromanaged? So never mind. I'll just wait. But that's just a typical example. But
Yeah. Yeah.
when it comes to micromanagement, and this has goes back to your thought of communication. When they ask me that, I ask them straight out, have you told your boss that you feel like you're being micromanaged? And many of them don't. They talk to their
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
I go, hey, now tell him, because maybe it's not even clear what from your part what he wants from you.
Yeah.
All right. And you're not even being clear with him what you expect him to do for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
tell him and
Yeah.
figure out a way to work it better. Uh, uh, Otherwise, if he wants to report every half day, give him the report every quarter day until he shuts up. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, as I've said, in that case, that's really where technology can help.
Right.
Um. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, actually, I was already going to start winding us down.
Okay.
Okay. And,
Yeah.
uh, I feel like that this conversation can go on forever. Okay. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, we don't have that time. But it was really really nice talking to you about this. Your Davidic growth model, the three: equip, enable, and empower, and they all have to come together. They're not individual things that have to happen. They all have to come together and eventually empower the users. And as you mentioned, it's a cycle. You'll find
Yeah.
yourself in a new position where you have to again equip yourself, enable. But once you get used to the cycle, it becomes maybe second nature, and it's a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
easier to work through it. But otherwise, Boogie, is there anything else you'd like to share with us? Maybe you have some events coming up.
Uh. Yeah. I actually have a. Well, but I'm not prepared to share the poster. But I have an event on the April. I'll be talking to schools, okay? Because I think, uh, especially with what happened in the pandemic, schools need a lot of briefing in terms of how
Mhm.
they will move into a post-pandemic scenario. Okay? In fact, just recently we held a roundtable discussion with school administrators, and it is about the role of blended learning in post-pandemic education. And but the one I'm having on April 15, I'll be talking also to the heads of schools, and what I'm going to talk to them about is uh, thriving in a digital economy. Same to the first interview that I had with Dino in season 11,
Right.
but it's now more focused in terms of from the perspective of schools. Okay, what they would need to understand, what they would need to prepare for, and how they can uh, equip, enable, and empower themselves so that they are able to cope with the demands of a post-pandemic education.
What's actually challenging for everybody, and the schools is obviously one of them, but even for us, it's the speed at which things are happening.
Oh yes,
I mean, I haven't started playing around with the Chat GPT, but some of my brothers have, and I said the stuff it can do, the things it can do. I look at it, wow.
yeah, and there's now even a version 4.
Yeah, it's not, it's more than just jaw dropping, you know. And I said this is going to, and if we're not nimble enough to change fast enough to work with it, it's already difficult now. I mean, come on, most of us change our phone even before we can maximize it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yep,
and it's really really going to be a challenge for everybody. So I
yeah,
am looking forward to talking more about other things, maybe in another panel interview like you had with the AI group. That was
yeah,
also an
sure,
excellent panel.
yeah,
And for everybody, our next session will be with May Año Nuevo, who will be talking about leading change in an age of transformation. It seems to connect pretty much with our topics today as an extension. And of course, if you liked and enjoyed what you watched, please do not forget to click below the share, the like buttons. And of course, as always, learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas.